The top stories tonight in Y News. Police General Guillermo Eleazar has been appointed as the next chief to lead the Philippine National Police.
The Philippines has administered more than 2 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines in the past 2 months.
Political analyst says that COVID-19 vaccines can be used as leverage in the 2022 national election. The Philippines imposes a travel ban on Pakistan and 3 more countries.
Pfizer-BioNTech is seeking approval to give COVID-19 vaccine for children 2 to 11 years old.
And New York Police Department retires its robotic police dog. Good evening, Philippines and the world. Today is Wednesday, May 5, 2021. I am Marlene Delgado.
Join us in the next hour as we deliver today's top stories around the country and in other parts of the world. I'm Angelo Castro III.
We are also seen in 1,935 satellite monitoring centers nationwide and via live streaming worldwide through the UNTV News and Rescue social media accounts and our website, untvweb.com. I am William Theo.
First in the news. President Rodrigo Duterte has chosen Police Lieutenant General Guillermo Lorenzo T. Eleazar as the next chief of the Philippine National Police, according to Interior Secretary Eduardo Año. In a separate statement, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the chief executive had signed Eleazar's appointment. Eleazar, the current number 2 man of the PNP, being the PNP Deputy Chief for Administration, is set to place his Mista, General de Bolsinas, who is set to retire on May 8, Saturday. Eleazar thanked President Duterte for his appointment, which he said was a rare opportunity that came with the challenges of good leadership and meeting the high expectations of the Filipinos. A year from now, Filipinos will once again vote for the country's next leaders. Many names are now surfacing as the potential presidential bets for the 2022 elections, but none of them have confirmed. According to some experts, possible candidates for the country's next chief executive could be those who are topping the recent surveys. They include Davao City Mayor and presidential daughter Sara Duterte, Senator Manny Pacquiao, Manila Mayor Isko Moreno Dumagoso, and Senator Christopher Bongo. According to Professor Edmund Dayaw of the Ateneo School of Government, the hesitancy of some politicians is part of a political strategy, just like what happened during the 2016 elections when most candidates, including President Duterte, announced their candidacy just months away from the elections.
Since 2016, the rule of thumb has become much closer to the elections. This time around, as you can see, many have somehow been shy, or should we say hesitant to make any declaration, precisely because they see the 2016 presidential run of the incumbent as some kind of a template in terms of political strategy.
University of the Philippines political science professor Dr. Clarita Carlos also believes this is part of their political tactics.
They should stop being coy about it unless they have really nothing between their ears. Because as I said, if they have an agenda, you really have to think about it very seriously.
Dr. Carlos hopes that the presidential candidates will make their messages simple by focusing on 2 important issues, health and education. Professors Dayaw and Carlos further urge the public to get to know the candidates and exercise their right to vote.
Meanwhile, the COVID-19 vaccination in the country may become a leverage in the upcoming 2022 national elections. According to a political analyst, it is unavoidable to think that every step of the government may have an influence in the upcoming poll. Nel Maribohok explains why.
The 2022 national elections will be held a year from now. This is the chance of every Filipino to choose who will be the next leader of the country. One of the quality the Filipinos are looking for a leader is how he or she can respond in the needs of the poor, especially in a pandemic crisis. According to political analyst Professor Ramon Casiple, the COVID-19 vaccines may be used as leverage of some politicians for their ambition, especially if the vaccination program will coincide to the upcoming campaign period.
Ang pinatarget na period talaga ng maramihang vaccination ay bandang October, starting October. Pag ganyan ang plano, assuming na totoo yung planong yan, tatama ang malaking impact sa vaccination. Tamang-tama sa February, Marso. Election yun. Election season na.
The worst part is they may delay the jabs program for their personal interest. Based on the schedule of the Commission on Elections, the filing of certificates of candidacy for all elective positions is set on October 1 to 8. This is also the month where the government targets its mass vaccination in full swing. According to Casiple, it's not surprising if the government will focus its vaccine rollout to the National Capital Region, which has the biggest voting population.
Politically kasi, yung Central Luzon, Metro Manila, saka Southern Tagalog, dandyan yung around kalahati ng mga botante sa national elections. Kaya kung nakatarget talaga na magkaroon ng mga pagkilos yan, may political impact, hindi kataka-taka.
Meanwhile, Professor Edmund Tayaw, the Executive Director of the Local Government Development Foundation, said that it's inevitable to think that every action in this certain time has something to do with the elections.
Lahat ng maaaring gawin ngayon, ng kahit na sino, whether nasa government o wala sa government, hindi mo maiwasan na tingnan na may kinalaman sa paghahanda sa darating na eleksyon. So whether it has something to do with the pandemic, and I'm inclined to think much of what we're doing now is really for or in response, or in the context of the pandemic, then therefore it's something that you cannot avoid. Talagang meron at merong kasamang politika yan.
Dreaming of becoming a public servant is not a bad thing if one truly have the good intentions to serve. But in the middle of a health crisis, Filipinos are looking forward for the action and result from the government. Nel Maribuho, UNTV News and Rescue, we serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Philippines passed the milestone of administering 2 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccines in the past 2 months. This is despite the slow arrival of vaccine supplies in the country. Janice Inhente reports why.
The Philippine government continues to further strengthen the vaccine confidence of Filipinos and achieve the target herd by the end of the year. From February up to present, the Philippines have received over 4 million doses of Sinovac, AstraZeneca, and Sputnik V vaccines. DOH Undersecretary Mirna Kabutahi said 320,586 individuals have already completed their 2 doses of the vaccine, while 1,744,649 received their first dose. Over 250,000 health workers have completed vaccination, while 1.1 million already received their first dose of the COVID-19 jab.
Nasa 2 million na yung ating naabot na jabs kahapon. All doses yan. Naiiwan na lang dyan ay yung iniiwan nating buffer para sa ating National Vaccination Operations Center.
Meanwhile, the rollout of the 15,000 doses of the Russian-made Sputnik V vaccine already started in Metro Manila. Of this figure, 2,634 have been vaccinated in Parañaque, Manila, Makati, and Taguig City.
Although ang ini-expect nating side effect, kagaya din ng mga nararamdaman natin sa iba-ibang bakuna, ang maganda dyan, wala kaming naitalang serious side effect. Kasi kung may serious side effect, nai-report ka agad yan.
The rollout of Sputnik V in 5 Metro Manila cities is expected to be in 5 days. Before the end of May, an additional 485,000 doses of Sputnik V vaccine will arrive in the country. Janice Inhente, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
There have been developments in the West Philippine Sea as more Chinese vessels are dispersing in areas within the country's exclusive economic zone. Leia Ilagan will tell us why.
7 Chinese militia vessels seen at Sabina Shoal off the coast of Palawan have dispersed after a series of challenges by the Philippine Coast Guard. National Security Advisor and National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea or NTF-WPS Chairperson Hermogenes Esperon Jr. says the Chinese vessels were seen nested at the shoal located 130 nautical miles west of Puerto Princesa, Palawan and east of Ayungin Shoal. The Philippine Coast Guard's BRP Cabra and Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources ships MCS 3002 and 3004 conducting maritime patrols in the area communicated with a Chinese ship to point out that Sabina Shoal is part of the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. The National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea Chairperson Hermogenes Esperon confirmed that the Philippine Coast Guard and Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources challenged the 7 Chinese militia vessels anchored in Sabina Shoal. The Philippine ships went closer to the Chinese ships when they did not respond, and then they dispersed the area. 5 Chinese maritime militia ships were again sighted at Sabina Shoal when BRP Cabra returned 2 days later on April 29. However, the Chinese ships left upon the arrival of the Philippine Coast Guard vessel. Currently, there are still 9 Chinese fishing vessels in the Julian Felipe Reef, while there are 3 in Bajo de Masinloc. Esperon said the Philippines will not be deterred from defending its national interest, patrimony, and dignity as a people with all available resources. Leia Ilagan, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The palace insisted that President Rodrigo Duterte did not promise in his 2016 campaign that to retake lost territory in the West Philippine Sea. Rosalie Cos will tell us why.
Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque hit back at retired Associate Justice Antonio Carpio on the issue of West Philippine Sea and said that the former Associate Justice is now talking as a politician. The palace official reiterated that the chief executive never promised to retake the lost territory in the West Philippine Sea. But what is clear, he added, no new reclamation was undertaken by China and no new territories were lost under the Duterte administration.
Hindi po yung panggugoyo dahil malinaw po ang salitang ginamit ni Presidente. Hindi po niya sinabi na yung nawalang teritoryo ng nakalipas na administrasyon maibabalik niya. Ang pinangako niya, wala nang mawawalang teritoryo sa Pilipinas na siya naman pong nangyayari ngayon.
The palace official also denied the accusation of Carpio that the president has practically confessed to committing grand estafa for claiming he never mentioned the issue of the West Philippine Sea during his campaign for the 2016 elections.
As a former justice, alam naman niya ang elemento ng estafa at alam niya na hindi ito estafa. He's now talking as a politician at nakakalungkot, no? Na sa isang usapin na napakaseryoso ng ating teritoryo, imbis na addressin ng mga issue, he has resorted to name calling. Kung estafador po ang presidente, anong tawag sa kanya? Na siya mismo ang sumulat ng desisyon kung saan nawala ang sangkatutak na territorial sea natin at internal waters. But we will not stoop down to his level.
Meanwhile, presidential spokesperson Roque also said under the Duterte administration, the Philippines is the one which drives away Chinese incursions in the West Philippine Sea and not the other way around. He was referring to Chinese vessels challenged and dispersed by the Philippine Coast Guard and Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources near the Sabina Shoal on April 27. Rosa Licoz, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
For those watching us on YouTube, please click the subscribe button you see on your screen and ring the bell for notification. You may also follow us on Facebook.
The Philippine government has imposed travel ban on Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh to prevent the entry in the country of the COVID-19 variant discovered in India. Passengers coming from or who have been to these countries within 14 days are prevented from entering the country from May 7 to May 14, 2021. However, those passengers coming from or who have been to these countries before the said period can still enter the country but are subject to undergo strict quarantine protocols. Meanwhile, Filipinos and foreign passengers merely transiting through India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh upon arrival in the Philippines need not to complete a full 14-day facility-based quarantine, but should comply with the existing testing and quarantine protocols of the national government. Meanwhile, 6 passengers from India who arrived in the Philippines before the travel ban was imposed to have tested positive for COVID-19. Meanwhile, the Department of Health is looking to require incoming travelers to be tested within 7 or 8 days after their arrival in the country. Aiko Miguel explains why.
Many travelers from India entered the Philippines even before the government implemented travel restrictions last April 29. 6 of them tested positive based on their COVID-19 test result.
110 po sa kanila ay nagkaroon na ng pagsusuri or pagtetest sa kanila. 6 turned out to be positive and it is now submitted to the Philippine Genome Center for whole genome sequencing.
Currently, 6 are being tracked down by authorities. The DOH has not yet identified the nationalities of the said travelers. Meanwhile, the DOH recommends that COVID-19 testing be done on the 7th or 8th day of incoming travelers' isolation. Under the current protocol, COVID-19 testing is done on the 5th day of their isolation.
Based on evidences that on the 7th and the 8th day, nandun yung pinakamataas na porsyento that a person who might have the disease might turn positive. Although hindi natin dinidiscount yung fact na maaring meron na 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Pero pinakamataas po because the viral load is high is on the 7th and 8th day. And for us to be able to have accurate test results at mai-isolate natin agad ang may sakit, ay ito po ang atin pong nire-rekomenda ngayon. Ito po ay kailangan pang pag-usapan sa IATF. We are just being factual. We are just giving evidences to state kung bakit po natin ito nire-rekomenda.
The DOH admits that contact tracing efforts in the country has to be strengthened, especially that the ideal contact tracing ratio 1:15 has not been achieved, given that additional contact tracers are hired.
We recognize that fact na among our different responses or strategies that we are doing since the start of the response, isa ang contact tracing sa medyo weak ang ating response. Especially here in NCR, if we try to look at that, it varies. Meron naman iba, until now, nasa 1:5 or 1:6 pa rin tayo. But one thing that we can tell you, no? So, kapag sinabing maraming undetected, that is a possibility, yes. But we have to look at the classification of our cases right now. So when we say undetected, because you were not able to trace them through contact tracing and because siguro hindi sila nag-show ng symptoms.
Meanwhile, there are 1,075 B.1.351 COVID-19 variant recorded in the Philippines. This is the variant of concern first discovered in South Africa. The DOH explains that it can't be concluded that this variant is dominant in the country, although there are more cases of it compared to the B.1.1.7 COVID-19 variant first discovered in United Kingdom.
So ito po, purposeful ang ating surveillance, so hindi pa natin mas ascertain kung talagang sila na yung prevalent na variants dito at saka kung sila na talaga yung meron na tayong masasabi that we have this community transmission. That's why WHO until now cannot give that classification yet because they need further study so that we can be able to determine if really there is community transmission already from these different types of variants.
Majority of the recorded B.1.1.7 and B.1.351 COVID-19 variants in the country are from the National Capital Region and Region 4A or Calabarzon. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Philippines has granted an emergency use authorization or EUA for Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. Food and Drug Administration or FDA Director General Eric Domingo said the regulatory agency approved Moderna's application for EUA after conducting a thorough review on data currently available, including those from adequate and well-known controlled trials. Domingo said the vaccine will be administered to individuals aged 18 and above. The government has placed around 20 million COVID-19 vaccines from the U.S. drug maker Moderna that will be split between public and private sectors. The initial batch of the shipment is expected to arrive by June. President Rodrigo Duterte's vaccination against COVID-19 became controversial after using Sinopharm from China. Some have questioned the act because only a compassionate special permit has been issued for Sinopharm and has no emergency use authorization. Let us learn the difference between a compassionate special permit and the emergency use authorization for vaccines and medicines that would combat the new coronavirus in Marvin Callas's report.
It is unjust to inject President Rodrigo Duterte with the Sinopharm vaccine because it doesn't have an emergency use authorization yet to prove initial studies claiming its safety. In an interview in Politiscoop, health reform advocate and former National Task Force advisor Dr. Tony Liachon questions why did Health Secretary Francisco Duque III allow the president to be injected by a vaccine that has only a compassionate use permit. But what is the difference between the emergency use authorization and the compassionate special permit being given on drugs and vaccines to be used in the country? Under the Department of Health Order No. 4 Series of 1992, it states that CSP is given on drugs or medical products if there's a need to be used by a patient having severe illness and there's no other drugs available in the country. It is even when a drug is not registered or still in the process of registration. CSP is usually given on unregistered drugs that can cure acquired immunodeficiency syndrome or AIDS, cancer, and other life-threatening conditions.
Ang compassionate use ginagamit kung wala ka ng ibang magagamit pa na para ma-save mo yung pasyenteng yon. At pero hindi mo siya pwedeng i-mass production kasi compassionate use siya, unique siya to the person na nire-request mo.
EUA, on the other hand, is given if there's an initial study or clinical trial in other countries proving its efficacy and safety. Dr. Liachon suggests that Secretary Duque should have asked the vaccine experts panel and should have not allowed the president to be vaccinated by Sinopharm, considering that the president's wealth depends on it.
Imagine mo the Department of Health Secretary tolerating a violation of the law. Unregistered siya. Unregistered siya. And also for the president's safety, not for anything else. Ngayon, kung hindi na-assess ng vaccine expert panel, 76 ang Pangulo. At yung pala walang enough study for elderly. Ito bang Sinopharm ay safe para sa elderly? Wala. So how can you actually gain support right now? Kasi hindi man lang na-evaluate ng vaccine expert panel. Nakakatakot yan.
Secretary Duque earlier mentioned that the vaccination of the president is under the CSP guidelines and in accordance to the recommendation of the president's private doctor.
Yung CSP ang siyang authority na pwedeng gamitin ito na galing ang authorization sa FDA. At ang pangalawa naman, ang desisyon ni Pangulo na gamitin ito ay batay na rin sa prescription ng kanyang doktor.
The palace meanwhile stands firm that the vaccination is legitimate and the president had not violated any law. Marvin Callas, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Pfizer-BioNTech aims by the end of the year to administer its vaccine to children. Queenie Rivera reports why live. Queenie, go ahead.
Pfizer-BioNTech will apply for an emergency use authorization or EUA from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration or USFDA to use its COVID-19 vaccine in children ages 2 to 11 years old in September. By early next week, the company is expected to get FDA approval for emergency use of its vaccine in children 12 to 15 years old. For the rest of the month, Pfizer plans the full approval for the vaccine to be used in ages 16 to 85. And by August, clinical trial data will be made available of the vaccine's safety within pregnant women. And receiving full approval and authorization by the Food and Drug Administration in use of the vaccine will allow for Pfizer to market the vaccine directly to consumers. Having full approval will also allow for the boost in the confidence of the vaccine, reducing the lingering worries of the efficiency and safety of the vaccine. As of now, Pfizer is currently under emergency use authorization in adults. Diego?
Thank you, Queenie Rivera, reporting live from Singapore.
Advocates will continue the mass distribution of the anti-parasitic drug ivermectin despite being investigated by the Philippine Food and Drug Administration. Meanwhile, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque reveals that a member of President Rodrigo Duterte's cabinet has been taking the drug. Ray Palayo will tell us why.
Anak Kalusugan Party List Representative Mike Defensor said that they will pursue the house-to-house distribution of ivermectin. According to Defensor, this is to prevent people swarming the activity area. The lawmaker reiterated that no violations were committed during their symbolic distribution in Quezon City. The Food and Drug Administration has started its investigation on the matter.
Our job here is really to take a look, and that's what we're doing in our enforcement unit, is checking if any rules have been violated.
Meanwhile, Defensor reveals that there are 3 members of President Rodrigo Duterte's cabinet who are taking ivermectin against COVID-19. Presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque, however, only confirmed one, but he refused to name the official. The palace official also denied using the drug. Defensor further calls out other government officials for supporting his advocacy.
Sana tumulong na rin yung marami sa atin sa kabinete. Dahil alam ko maraming uminom sa kabinete. Tumulong na rin talaga para naman talagang magkaroon ng access at magkaroon ng, kumbaga, ang mga kababayan natin, hindi na ganito yung kinikipit dahil gusto lang nilang uminom ng ivermectin.
The FDA meanwhile stressed that they do not recommend the use of ivermectin for COVID-19 treatment or prevention due to insufficient scientific evidence. Ray Pelayo, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Based on the latest case bulletin of the Department of Health, there were 5,685 new individuals who tested positive for COVID-19, pushing the total number of active cases to 62,713. Of the active cases, 94.4% have mild symptoms, 1.8% are asymptomatic, 1.6% are severe, while 1.2% are in critical condition. The Philippines' cumulative tally of cases rose to 1,073,555. The DOH noted that 92.5% of the overall tally have already recovered, or 993,042 recoveries. This figure includes the 8,961 new survivors that were logged today. However, 178 patients died due to COVID-19, raising the death toll to 17,800. The country's case fatality rate stood at 1.66%. The National Kidney and Transplant Institute launches its new off-site hemodialysis facility and dormitory, but the NKTI officials say its actual operation will only start next month. Asher Kadapan Jr. explains why.
The sophisticated equipment that will initially be used for the newly built modular hemodialysis facility and dormitory in Quezon City will still need to undergo certain processes before it can operate accordingly. The National Kidney and Transplant Institute's off-site facility dedicated for outpatients who contracted COVID-19 is expected to only start its actual operation towards the end of the month of May.
Ang makina, hindi naman yan plug and play, di ba? Yung water system, i-culture pa natin. Ang culture, para walang bakterya na naililipat sa mga pasyente. So that means siguro 5 days yun, and then konti pang mga touch sa ating dialysis areas, stations.
Once its operation starts, it may provide hemodialysis service to 60 COVID-19 patients per day. NKTI officials said that this will significantly help their outpatients as some experience delays due to the limited facility available.
We have about 46 patients na gano'n na outpatient na sila, pero hindi po sila tinatanggap ng kanilang dialysis center kasi COVID positive pa sila. So, dinadialysis po natin sila sa aming inpatient. So, pag nagbukas po itong HD COVID facility na in-inaugurate today, dito na namin sila madadialysis ng maganda na hindi na sila sisikip pa with our inpatient, hindi na po sila magmimix.
Meanwhile, its constructor, the Department of Public Works and Highways, says that more COVID-19 facilities are scheduled to open across the country soon.
We're targeting more than 800 facilities nationwide, and sa modular hospitals po, meron kami mga 300 at karamihan po ng 300 ay matatapos sa loob ng Mayo.
Secretary Mark Villar also said that occupancy rate in the COVID-19 facilities that the government constructed continues to decrease. Asher Kadapan Jr., UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The country's headline inflation stayed at 4.5% in April due to slower movements in the prices of commodities. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority or PSA, this is the same annual growth rate recorded in March, but quicker than 2.2% registered in April 2020. The major contributors in April's inflation is food and non-alcoholic beverages, including meat and other cereal and flour products. Another contributor is the transportation and the movement in oil prices. The Bureau of Immigration arrested at least 50 Chinese nationals inside the factory of a steel company in Maasim Town, Sarangani Province for alleged misrepresentation. Dante Amento reports.
The Bureau of Immigration has arrested 50 Chinese nationals working in Mindanao for allegedly violating Philippine immigration law, such as falsification of documents and misrepresentation. The Bureau says they presented themselves as skilled servicemen when they secured work permits last March. But based on the surveillance or investigation, they are working in a steel company in Maasim, Sarangani Province as laborers.
Nakita po na may discrepancy and marami po sa kanila ay doing manual labor. Kumbaga nagtatrabaho po in construction, pagkakapintero dahil may tinatayo po silang mga buildings po doon sa area.
Immigration spokesperson Dana Sandoval has also disclosed that only one person was able to present documents as permanent resident in the country. They were arrested by the Joint Forces of the Immigration, Philippine National Police, Armed Forces of the Philippines, and the National Intelligence Coordinating Committee or NICA. Meanwhile, if proven guilty after appropriate investigation, they will be deported and blacklisted in the country.
Kapag napatunayan po through the deportation proceedings na sila po talaga ay may violation against the Immigration Act, sila po ay madedeport at katumbas po nun, sila po ay masasama po sa ating blacklist at hindi na po mapapayagang makabalik po sa bansa.
Dante Amento, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
And for the news abroad, Mexican authorities are now conducting investigation on a killer train that collapsed in a busy road in Mexico, killing and injuring dozens of people. Marvy Delfin will give us the details live. Marvy?
Kath, an overpass carrying a subway train in Mexico City suddenly collapsed late Monday onto busy traffic below. Government officials have identified at least 24 people killed and 79 seriously injured and hospitalized, including children. 1 out of 4 people stuck underneath the rubble has since been freed. The train was reported to be traveling on the elevated part and newest line of the city's rapid transit system, also called the Golden Line, when it suddenly collapsed, leaving the 2 train carriages dangling down the broken overpass. Rescue efforts have been suspended for now, as authorities become worried that debris and other train parts might smash down the road. The city's mayor, Claudia Sheinbaum, then confirmed that a full external and technical investigation, including international engineering experts, will be carried out to accurately confirm who was responsible for the incident. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said that the investigations and results will not be hidden from the citizens. For now, both the mayor and the president will strongly prioritize the casualties and their relatives. Emergency personnel have since been dispatched for a search for further survivors as the collapse and its debris continue to break down. Kath?
Thank you, Marvy Delfin, for that live report. Medical students and interns are being sent to India's COVID-19 front lines to aid in the country's fight against a second wave of the virus. Maeve and Dog will tell us why live. Maeve?
Kath, a shortage in healthcare workers and medical supplies are causing India's healthcare system to collapse as the country reaches 20 million coronavirus cases on Tuesday. The number of patients requiring hospitalization greatly exceed the number of trained health workers, forcing doctors to send medical students to the front lines. Medical Superintendent at Holy Family Hospital, Dr. Samit Ray, said they have stretched themselves to the limit and that they are operating far beyond their capacity on every ward. Dr. Ray also added that they have gone from a ratio of 2 nurses to every 3 patients to only 1 nurse for 4 patients, due to staff also falling sick. With this ratio, Dr. Ray believes it is impossible to provide quality care in an ICU. The Indian government announced that final year undergraduates will provide online teleconsultations for mild cases, while interns will complete COVID management duties. With that, exams for trainee doctors will be pushed back to August 31 to allow deployed students to focus on treating COVID-19 patients. Kath?
Thank you, Maeve and Dog, reporting live from Australia. A robotic dog, once hailed by the New York Police Department a high-tech crime-fighting sidekick, is getting sent back to its owner. Early Briones will tell us why.
After the pushback from the New York residents and elected officials, the New York Police Department, or NYPD, has confirmed the $94,000 leased robot dog named Spot will no longer be in use. Spot had been acquired by the NYPD last August, and it had been employed in the field a few times since then, including one instance when it was used to scout a hostage situation in the Bronx before officers entered the building. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of District of New York, who then called it a robotic surveillance ground drone, praised activists in her district who pushed back on the tech to demand that police funds should instead go toward investments like school counseling. John Miller, NYPD's Deputy Commissioner for Intelligence and Counterterrorism, defended the department's use of the robot in an interview with the New York Times. Miller said the DigiDog keeps officers out of harm's way, and it's cheaper and more advanced than the robots the force has used in the past. However, the creators of Spot, Boston Dynamics, told The Verge that while it knew the robot was being leased to the Army, it was unaware it was being used in these exact scenarios. Spot was not weaponized in these exercises, but used by soldiers for forward surveillance. Meanwhile, New York City Council member Ben Callos proposed a law that would ban the police from owning or operating weaponized robots. Early Briones, UNTV News and Rescue, we serve the people, we give glory to God.
And those are the reasons behind the news in other parts of the globe. I am Kat Dumaraos, live from Bangkok, Thailand. Good evening.
And those are the reasons behind the news, May 5, 2021. I am Herlene Delgado.
Reasons we deliver to you as they unfold. I'm Angelo Castro III.
And because we need to know, we will always ask why. I am William Theo. We serve the people. We give glory to God.